We won't read it in full, but let me read maybe a few paragraphs which I think are particularly important. And I'm very proud that we are unveiling this today here. So, today, and I quote here, today we emphasize the pivotal role of freedom of expression in enabling journalists, media workers, environmental activists, scientists, and citizens to promote the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and raise awareness about climate change, environmental challenges, and degradation in the pursuit of sustainable development. In this regard, we emphasize the states have the obligation to respect, protect, and promote human rights, including in all actions undertaken to address environmental challenges and to take measures to protect the human rights of all as recognized in various international instruments. And I continue. In this regard, we acknowledge UNESCO's continued commitment to ensure that World Press Freedom Day is a truly multi-stakeholder and diverse platform where all relevant actors can raise their voices to protect and promote freedom of expression and achieve sustainable development. On this World Press Freedom Day, we reaffirm our commitment to the safety of journalists and the defense of freedom of opinion and expression as a fundamental human right. Our ongoing efforts underscore the vital link between press freedom and societies where truth can flourish free from mis- and disinformation. We further urge member states to do their utmost to prevent violence, intimidation, threats, and attacks against journalists and media workers. We condemn the killings of journalists and media workers everywhere, including in conflict situations. We also strongly condemn any attempts to harass, intimidate, attack, or arbitrarily detain journalists and media workers. And finally, we emphasize that the improper or malicious design and use of artificial intelligence systems can undermine information integrity, that human rights and fundamental freedoms must be respected, protected, and promoted in this era of artificial intelligence, and further call upon all member states and other stakeholders to promote safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence systems in an inclusive and equitable manner and for the benefit of all. Strong words indeed, and I think worth an applause here. And you can read the declaration in full also on the website of this conference and UNESCO. But let's maybe hear a bit more from the signatories themselves. And we start with Ambassador Miculescu. She has been holding her current position as permanent delegate of Romania to UNESCO since 2021. During her 33 years of diplomatic service, she was the spokesperson for the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and senior media advisor to the minister, foreign policy advisor to the president of Romania, senior advisor for public outreach to the government of Iraq, ambassador and permanent representative of Romania to the UN, as well as representative of the UN Secretary General and director of the UN office in Belgrade. Also, I would like to mention she is the first woman in Romania to be granted the diplomatic rank of ambassador. And of course, Ambassador Miculescu is currently serving as the president of the 42nd session of the UNESCO General Conference and thus the first Romanian ever to lead a governing body of this organization. So, Ambassador, 3 years ago, the UN governing bodies decided for the first time to join efforts and make an urgent call for the protection and promotion of press freedom. This year, you added a call to counter disinformation and protect journalists reporting on the realities of the global environmental crisis. So, as the president of the General Conference of the leading UN agency when it comes to the freedom of expression, why do you believe it's so important to join forces for the 4 UN bodies on this issue?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'm very happy to see you all here, interested in our event, even if maybe, you know, it's not as spicy as having famous journalists, actors, or influencers. So thank you for bearing with us. The initiative belonged to my predecessor, the Ambassador Santiago Mourão from Brazil. And he was actually the first one to think that, you know, the leaders of the governing bodies should join forces in order to, you know, to call for protection and promotion of the freedom of expression. And as of November last year, when I became president and the mandate ends in 2025, I wanted to continue the legacy of my colleagues, so I decided to invite the current leaders of the UN governing bodies to continue speaking with one voice on critical issues. And I think that this is very important. Indeed, upholding the spirit of solidarity and togetherness are some of the key words of my mandate, and I want to continue like this. And actually, this is in alignment with UNESCO's sacred mission of being an international broker of peace that has to be built in the minds of men and women, as it says in the first phrase of the Constitution of UNESCO. And in this spirit, as custodians of universal values and advocates for the common good, we must lead by example. As elected leaders of the UN, and trust me, we both know this entails a very high responsibility when you are elected by 193 respectively 194 countries in our international organizations. We have a key role to play and demonstrate through concrete action that actually the UN can walk the talk by listening to each other, by uniting our voices, by engaging in constructive dialogue, and by finding common ground. So each joint declaration, because actually, you know, this celebration of the World Press Freedom Day became a very important platform of reasserting the value of the freedom of expression. In the previous joint statements, we tackled different aspects. In 2022, we highlighted the need to ensure that journalists and media workers are working in safe, independent and free conditions. In 2023, we actually, I remind you that that was the year when we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? So actually the joint statement recognized the contribution of the freedom of expression and of the freedom of opinion to the fulfillment of other human rights. And I could say that these joint statements over the last 2 editions by the heads of the governing bodies from New York, from Paris, and from Geneva have not only demonstrated a sense of shared values or common purpose, they actually have also enabled a stronger coordination between the different UN HQs and the UN system as a whole. And I think this is really essential, especially when it's about issues as important as the freedom of expression, right? As a result, there has been closer interaction between the delegations from the 3 UN hotspots, reflected also in the relevant resolutions adopted by the governing bodies. So as we head towards key global events such as the Summit of the Future, and the distinguished President of ECOSOC is very involved in this process, the topic of this year has for us a particular significance because the spread of environmental disinformation poses a grave threat to our planet and its inhabitants, we all know that, underscoring the urgent need for concerted action to inspire meaningful change. Since last year, the President of ECOSOC joined our group of presidents in delivering this statement, and I'm very grateful for your presence here with us, Mrs. President. I'm also very grateful to the President of UN General Assembly and the President of the Human Rights Council for their commitment and support. And as a novelty, besides this joint statement, I'm very happy to be able to tell you that we made a step further. Next week, we will have a special event on the same joint statement at the celebration of the World Press Freedom Day in Geneva at the UN HQ there, where I will join the President of the Human Rights Council this time to present the statement. So I'm very excited. In February, when we started to work on this, we didn't know that we will end up with a special event during this fantastic celebration. And I take this opportunity to thank from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of 194 hearts that I represent tonight. I thank the government of Chile for organizing so wonderfully this very, very, very crucial celebration. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And yeah, it's great to see so much unity at the United Nations on this very important issue. Thank you very much for that. We have two presidents here. Two presidents have sent us video messages. So let's now hear from another one of the esteemed signatories of the joint declaration, Ambassador Dennis Francis, President of the UN General Assembly, who sent us this message.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am most grateful to the President of the General Conference of UNESCO for the invitation to join in commemorating World Press Freedom Day 2024. And also to the government of the Republic of Chile for organizing this significant event, a testament of your unwavering commitment to that timeless democratic principle of freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is also a fundamental human right, enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 75th anniversary of which we commemorated proudly last December here at the United Nations. Press freedom, a core component of the right to freedom of expression, recognizes the right of journalists and media organizations to operate independently and to report the news impartially without censorship or intimidation. This year's theme, A Press for the Planet, Journalism in the Face of the Environmental Crisis, is especially timely given the imperative of accelerating action towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals over the next 6 years. It underscores the critical role of journalists and media workers in shedding light on the causes and consequences of current environmental crises, including an objective assessment of corporate and state response, as the case might be, in an atmosphere that guarantees absolute journalistic freedom. Excellencies, sustainability remains one of the core unifying principles of my presidency of the General Assembly. Last month, I convened the first ever UN General Assembly Sustainability Week, among other things, to bolster international awareness of all three dimensions of sustainable development, the social, economic, and environmental, in an integrated manner, but with particular emphasis on the concept and indeed the imperative of achieving sustainability. My interactions with journalists and media, both online and offline, were critical to informing global audiences about these issues and raising awareness about the prevailing gaps and challenges, thus triggering innovations and shaping policy decisions to address environmental challenges. Sadly, journalists and media workers across the globe are increasingly under threat, from kidnapping and torture to arbitrary detention, and losing their lives at alarming rates, whether as casualties of war or as deliberate targets of state authority. as we honor those members of the Fourth Estate who have fallen in our service on this day, let us all recommit to protecting journalists and media workers as a paramount obligation for promoting inclusive media coverage to inform and educate society, including on current environmental issues. I therefore call upon member states to prioritize upholding and honoring freedom of expression, protecting journalists as well as media workers, and ending impunity. Ensuring accountability for attacks against and harassment of journalists and media workers is crucial to upholding democratic values globally. In this era, characterized by the pervasive trend of misinformation and disinformation, society needs the independence, expertise, and integrity of a free media more than ever. When applied to climate and other environmental issues, such trends are undermining our urgent efforts for climate action, effective policy formulation, and the protection of vulnerable communities, particularly women and girls, who are often disproportionately affected by climate change. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, the upcoming Summit of the Future, along with the Global Digital Compact in particular, present unique opportunities to strengthen international cooperation, including on the question of access to reliable information. As we look to the future, still with optimism, in the face of the myriad of challenges, we must galvanize our efforts in supporting and amplifying the voices of those who speak truth to power and clarity to the world on environmental issues, upon which hangs the very nature and sustainability of our civilization on this planet. On this day, let us rededicate ourselves to fostering a global culture where truth in reporting prevails and promotes evidence-based decision-making for sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the President of the UN General Assembly. And we've got more. With the human right of freedom of expression and free access to information on the line, let's hear from the President of the UN Human Rights Council, Ambassador Omar Zniber.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is an honor for me to address you on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day. I wish to thank Ambassador Miculescu for having invited me to participate in this event and to join the joint statement on freedom of expression facing the environmental crisis which we are unveiling today. I commend UNESCO for continuing this important annual initiative, which serves to raise awareness on the fundamental role played by journalists in the promotion and protection of human rights. The theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day could not be timelier. Climate change and environmental damage are having negative implications on the effective enjoyment of all human rights, and the situation requires our urgent attention. In this regard, the Human Rights Council is paying close attention and ringing the alarm bells. The Council and the United Nations General Assembly have recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right. And the Council's Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights in the context of climate change and its Special Rapporteur on right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right are regularly monitoring and reporting on these issues. The environmental crisis is a human rights crisis. That is why one of my priorities as President of the Council this year is to encourage it to take an even greater focus on the interconnectedness of climate change, food security, and health security, as well as on the issue of artificial intelligence and its impact on freedom of speech and access to credible information. We rely on independent journalists and scientists to bring to the attention of the general public reliable and credible information about the impact of the environmental crisis is having on the lives of people in all regions of the world. But they need to be able to speak out freely without fear of being subjected to threats and violence as a consequence of doing their jobs. Journalists play an important role in defending human rights. Their investigations and reports give visibility to injustices and voice to victims. But attacks on journalists and on media freedom continue to take place, too often in the shadow of impunity. These actions not only harm individual journalists and media organizations, but are severely detrimental to the functioning of inclusive societies and democracies. The Human Rights Council recognized that the ability of the media to investigate and to publish the result of their investigations without fear of reprisals plays an important role in societies, and it regularly expresses its concern about the ongoing and deepening threats to media diversity and independence. In addition to addressing issues related to the safety of journalists and freedom of expression, the Council is also raising attention on the issue of disinformation. At its most recent session, which concluded on the 5th of April, the Council adopted by consensus a resolution on the, I quote, role of states in countering the negative impact of disinformation on the enjoyment and realization of human rights, end quote. It recognized the importance of protecting the space for scientific inquiry and evidence-based debate and decision-making, and the need to address, in a manner that complies with international human rights law, targeted disinformation campaigns to discredit scientific research. The Council's Advisory Committee will be conducting a study on the impact of disinformation on the enjoyment and realization of the human rights, and the OHCHR will also convene an expert workshop on the issue. In addition to adopting resolutions, the Council's special procedures and UPR mechanism play an essential role in raising attention on the challenges being faced with regards to freedom of expression and safety of journalists, and provides recommendations on how to overcome them. But in order to turn the Council's discussions, decisions, and recommendations into concrete action and results, we must strengthen the coordination and collaboration of the different UN bodies. In this regard, I welcome this joint initiative led by UNESCO to bring us all together. I thank you.
The President of the UN Human Rights Council. And last but certainly not least, let me introduce to you the fourth signatory of the Joint Declaration, Her Excellency Ambassador Paula Narváez Ojeda. She has been serving as the ambassador and permanent representative of Chile to the United Nations since 2022. Previously, she held roles including officer in charge at UN Women in Guatemala, socio-political advisor at the UN Women Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, and regional advisor for governance and political participation. She also served as Minister Secretary General of Government and as a presidential advisor in Chile. And of course, and this is why she's here, she's now the President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So, Ambassador, the UN Economic and Social Council has been at the forefront of collective actions against climate change. There will be discussions this year, significant milestone coming up. Members will have to discuss achievements, but also shortcomings. So in this context, what is the importance of this joint declaration on world press freedom, and how will it affect your work?
Thank you so much, Carsten. I'll shift to Spanish. As I am in my country, I would like to talk in Spanish.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity and thank you, President of the conference, for this call to making this joint declaration. Why is it so important to make this joint declaration of the organisms of the United Nations? And I think this has to do with a demand from civil society, first of all, to look and act coherently in the different multilateral realms, in topics that are every day more fundamental for the sustainable development, for life, for sustainability of life. And in those regards, this is precisely what we're doing in this joint statement. We are committing as the main bodies of the United Nations to a joint action in a topic that's so relevant and that links the right to information and the right to freedom of expression and the freedom of press to live in an environment that's free of pollution, that respects biodiversity, and that's aware of the current climate emergency. Now, regarding the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, during the different conferences and meetings and work that we've had in the different subsidiary organs of the Council, I've been a first-hand witness of the huge amount of work that's being carried out everywhere in the world by different organizations to put on the first line of awareness, of attention, the situation of climate change and all of its effects and this triple crisis that's been mentioned since the morning today. But I would like to say that the most important voices, the most special voices that we've been hearing are the voices of indigenous people, the voices of young people, the voices of women who are defenders of environmental rights in their different communities. And so the ECOSOC gathers all these voices and makes a call to the different member states to commit with actions that are truly important in terms of implementation of those sustainable development goals which we have set as an international community. This year, especially, the high-level forum is taking place in New York in the month of July, between the 18th and the 19th of July. And in the presidency that I have been tasked with carrying out for this work, we have proposed, and the membership of the United Nations has agreed to review the first Sustainable Development Goal, which has to do with the eradication of poverty, with number 2, which is achieving no food crisis that we're having today, so zero hunger, and the 13th goal, which has to do precisely with climate change, the 16th, which is strong institutions to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, and number 17, which relates to the associations, the partnerships, the alliances that are needed in order to make progress in the Sustainable Development Goals. So the 13th goal is going to summon in New York in July an important sample of the commitment of the states and also the accountability of states in face of civil society regarding climate change. And this is where information is fundamental. The call that we are making is that states must commit in their national goals, that they continue making progress in them, that international cooperation has as a main topic of focus the support both in technical and financial aspects so that we can make progress in these regards, that there is for developing countries the necessary funding to be able to implement those actions that are demanded by the different transitions, energy transition, for example, precisely to protect our planet. I must insist, it's also important to put in the center the protection of human rights of those people who are in charge of disseminating this information, providing reliable information, and defending the rights of everybody, from the smallest communities to the biggest communities. To say that we have a special concern for developing states, which are insular states, for those least developed states, those states that don't have access to the sea, this ECOSOC conference has been very interested in them. And I would like to highlight the role and how fundamental it is to have women, young women, all women in their diversity as change agents in their communities in this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those words, and we'll be looking forward to progress on this vital issue. And that brings us already to the end of the session. Thank you once again to our speakers. Thank you to you in the audience for taking part in this important event. As a journalist, I've never had 4 presidents in one event, so that's a first for me, and especially I thank you all and the UN bodies for their support for us journalists, for free media, and also for the protection of free speech. I wish you all a great evening from my side and more productive discussions this evening and even tomorrow on some of the side events. From me, Carsten von Nahmen, thank you very much. Goodbye, and I think handing over again to my colleague, to the Master of Ceremonies. There you go. Thank you very much.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much. That was lovely. Well done. Thank you. Thank you all 3. Please, let's give them a warm applause. Thank you very much. Well, this first day of conference is coming to an end, and we want to hear the voices of those that have made it possible. But before that, we need to acknowledge and recall all of those that are not here today with us and pay tribute to their life and their work. I invite you to watch this brief video.
Das kann er, ne? Das kann er.
Thank you. That was very special. Well, I would now like to welcome Mr. Taki Jalesi, Assistant Director General for Communication and Information from the UNESCO. Please join me to share the last conclusions of this day.
Good evening, Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed participants, colleagues,